so funny because Jeremy came in and says, who put that word? If any of you speak Greek, please let me know, because this is a Greek term that's supposed to be pronounced Sisyphus. Did I say that right? If I didn't, somebody please help me with it, because that was the closest I got with it. The reason that word is there is in Today with Leslie, when she was talking about the cycle of getting into the prostitution and how you get into the system, you don't get out of the system. It dawned on me, I had an article out of the New York courts, and I'll pass it around and look at it, that talks to steering women out of that hole, that rabbit hole that they go down and they can't get out of. The judge who is starting this program, first in the nation, used this term. I said, he's got to be a reader. He's got to be a reader. This is Greek mythology. What this is, it was a king that dished the gods. He was disrespectful, and they didn't like it, so they were going to punish him. For eternity, he had to, Sisyphus, had to roll a boulder up a hill and watch it roll back down. He had to roll the boulder up the hill and watch the boulder roll back down for eternity because of being disrespectful. He used that term to describe the court in New York and how he's breaking that cycle by taking the courts that address the prostitution and he's diverting them into another court system that gives them services, mental health, that helps them find jobs, that works with them, and the laws that they've changed in New York. And it's the first in the nation. I went, that is so cool. So that's not one of my new words. If I ever learn to spell the darn thing, I'll be good, but, so that was the purpose of it. That is a Sisyphus, is when, in fact, you get caught in this constant circle and not being able to get out. Roll the boulder up, watch it come down. Roll it up, watch it come down. You do that for eternity. You never get out of the cycle. So she kind of hit me with that as she was talking. So I pulled that up and went, I'll share my word. I don't know how to spell it, but I'll share my word with you. So glad that you're here. I'm going to ask you, in fact, in the other class, I didn't really give a background for myself, and that probably was a mistake. My name is Marie Howe. I have a law enforcement political mediation background. Kind of a strange bedfellows, but somewhere in the 70s, I decided equal pay, equal work, and got into law enforcement. From that, to finish college, got into the political arena by working nights as a security officer and going to school during the day at Michigan State. Got through that, ended up as a sergeant at arms, which was the most fun job I ever had because at that time they had pages. They don't have pages today. These were the college kids that would come in with their political connections, be pages, and they would do work for all the offices. It was great. I had more fun with those kids. It was a great job. From that, I went into an office and started working on legislation. I only ended up, thank goodness, in 3 offices because my bosses were pretty stable and their constituents loved them, and I loved working in the legislature. I hate term limits, so there's my first political statement. Term limits is a very bad thing from my standpoint. So in 2013, I left because it was like, I'm not doing this anymore. But when I left, I was a legislative director. From there, I went into mediation. My children, I have 2 sons, looked at me and said, yeah, right, Mom, we're going to mediate. I said, yeah. He said, but you are so opinionated. How are you going to do that? And I said, frankly, guess what my opinion is. Everybody else's. So they were a little skeptical that I was going to do it, but I did, and I liked it. And I was on the board of trustees for a number of years. From that point, I was asked if I would come in and look at the trafficking issue. With my law enforcement background, I went, okay, well, how's this going to work? Got into it and did like a 180 on the whole issue, as Leslie would speak, as to whether you're a victim or whether you're a criminal. How does it work? What's the process? How do people get pulled into it? So it's been, for me, a kind of reverse. My husband's also in law enforcement. He has a reverse check, but we're working on him. He'll get there. So that's how I kind of got into the position that I'm here today in front of you with the legislation and speaking. So I'm going to ask each one of you, if you will stand up, give us your name, tell them where you're from, what experience or reasons for human trafficking, and why this class. Yeah, she says, sure. You can stand if you want, but standing usually works a little better.
I'm Chloe. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm in this class or whatever because I really like to see how things work at the federal and state level. I'm really interested in how all that works in different areas, not just in Trafficking. So.
Oh, good. You watch it, it's going to be this, and they're going to go. Now we'll compress it, and that's okay. Good. Thank you, Chloe. Oh, Miss.
I'm Cheyenne. I'm from Illinois. I'm a Greenville College student. And I just learned about Trafficking a few years ago. I've been passionate about learning about it ever since. And I never really learned like the laws of what laws we have, so I'm interested.
I'm Eric. I'm from Carrollton, Ohio. I come here to Spring Arbor, and I chose this session because I kind of want to see how that would go about fighting it at a more institutional level.
You're going to have fun.
My name is Jeff Clanton. I'm from Jackson area. I'm a school teacher. I'm in local school here. I'm also learned about this a couple years ago when Kevin Austin came to our church and spoke on this issue. Part of our Set Free leadership team here at our church, and I'm just here to gain more information about what's going on at the state and federal level.
Excellent.
My name is Alan Brownlee. I'm also from the Jackson area. Just looking to broaden my horizon because maybe I understood.
Oh, we'll fix that. Yes, okay, good.
I'm Kaylee. I'm from Trenton, Michigan, and I chose this because I'm very into law enforcement and I'm somewhat interested in justice aspect of future.
How far are you in the process of law enforcement?
2 years.
To finish the degree and then?
I haven't decided if I'm going to do the State Police Academy or if I'm going to go to school.
Oh, okay. That's two interesting choices. All right.
I'm Jenny, and I'm from Trenton, Michigan, also I'm Kaylee's mom. And I came along today to keep her company. And I have, it's been very eye-opening, to be perfectly honest. And I think
It is, isn't
I
it?
might have found something serious to focus on, which is cool. But we together chose this section. The current job that I have right now, I deal a lot with the state in a completely different manner, but I have that experience with working with the state and the feds for the organization I work with now. So being you work for a state agency, and I'm looking for a career change anyway. So I thought this could be interesting and helpful.
And all of that wrapped up. Yeah, good job. Thank you.
I'm Steve. I'm from Spring Arbor. I picked this one. I don't know. The legal stuff just kind of interests me, and so it seemed kind of right up my alley.
All right.
My name is Chris. I'm from Ludington, Michigan. I'm a global studies major here at Spring Arbor. Just kind of involved in the culture of anti-slavery here on campus a little bit. Just this coming here to Spring Arbor is where I first encountered it. And I just came to this class because I'm just kind of interested in the political level of things and just what's all going on with,
Oh, we're in a great conversation, guys. This is good. Thank you. I noticed I had a few of the flyers back there, so I didn't know if you guys got them, but I've got extras here. So let me put these out. You guys take one of each, pass them on. And I should say that I'm kind of the type that as I talk, you have a question or there's something that's not being explained or I'm over-explaining it, please feel free to interact. This will be kind of like a conversation type thing, because that's about the best way that you can do this. I'll get my handy-dandy notebook thing, and we will actually look at what's happening with the explanation of human trafficking, and I know you've probably heard it, I assume you have, that it's being termed now many times slavery, modern day slavery. Economically, it actually makes more money than drug trafficking. It's kind of, isn't that an interesting piece? When I first heard that, I had to go kind of check that out because I thought, how can that possibly be? But it's true. The economics of it are pretty overwhelming. And the persons that are, in order to identify, you probably have this, is compelled labor, where they are compelled that they're forced to do. Commercial sex through force, fraud, and coercion. And then, of course, in order to identify that, you have to know that, this individual can't leave, they have no choices, they are forced to be out there, whether it's labor or whether it's a sex trade, where in fact they have no control over their lives. The Traffic Victims Protection Act has started to use, and it was amended not too long ago, they're starting to use the involuntary service, which obviously we've all heard that, we have people who bring either from third world countries, from Haiti, from Africa, wherever, telling them they're coming here, going to school, they're going to get educated, they're going to be able to find a job. So a family brings an individual over and confiscates the green card, and all of a sudden they're trapped in the house doing involuntary servitude, cleaning the house, watching the children 12, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. Can't leave, can't do. That's trafficking. They're using the debt bondage to tell them they're coming over, they're going to get them a job, and it's going to cost them $500 to get them here. They come up with $500. Some wealthy families can do that, some not so wealthy, put everything together that they possibly have. They get here, they travel into this country, take them to 2 or 3 different states until now they owe them $15,000. In fact, I had a story that somebody told me. There was a group, they swore that there were 3, and they came from Mexico, spoke no English, swore that they were in Florida. They told they were going to Florida to work. Guess where they were? Here. When we look at that and go, how can that possibly be? Not knowing where they're at geographically, not understanding the language, wouldn't know what the weather was like. They were in Florida. So that's a trafficking issue, because sometimes it gets confused with kidnapping, it gets confused with others, which is very normal. As we get better at it, we're going to be better identifying it. So that's just to kind of play that out. I have pictures, you've seen pictures, but one of my favorite pictures. This is my trafficker. I keep him. He is a real estate mogul out of California, 70 years old. Traffics 12 to 13-year-olds. Does he look like your next door neighbor? My husband said, you're not going to tell us how your next door neighbor. Yeah, he looks like my next door neighbor. I would look at this guy walking down the street and not have a clue of what he's involved in. That's what he is. He's in jail now. But I keep it just as the reminder to let me know things are not always what they seem on the surface. And one of the dangers, of course, with trafficking is you get more paranoid about moving around. And you just have to learn to temper that and learn to look for the signs and know. And if your involvement takes you onto another level, you'll get really pretty good at that, I think. So you can sort between all that's happening. So, federal government legislation. 2000, the federal government introduced the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act. That was the very first thing that the feds did. And that was to address the issue not only nationally, but internationally. And in that, they divided it up. The bill is probably about 90-some pages long, just for that. They divided it into 3 sections. They had the act itself in Division A. In Division B, which is what they called them, it was the Violence Against Women Protection Act. And I think most probably heard about that. And the third was kind of a catch-all for miscellaneous. I love the miscellaneous catch-alls. It's anything else that there isn't there, you put it under Division C. They had to reauthorize that act in order to financially support it. In other words, to allocate funds for it. So they reauthorized it in 3, and 5, and 8. In 2013, when they went to reauthorize it, they did something different. They took the Trafficking Act and put it into the Women Against Violence Protection Act. So the Women's Act is still a very huge act, and in it has the human trafficking. Now, some think that watered it down. I'm not sure it watered it down. financially, they're still giving it millions and millions of dollars. So I don't know, from my standpoint, whether that watered it down or not. I think only time's gonna tell. But the assumption is because it's not standalone, it's now included in that. Why they did that, I'm not sure, other than the fact that you can allocate funds for so long, and then either human trafficking, it may not have done what they thought it would do, and of course, no one's gonna vote against Women Violence Act anymore. They're just not gonna do that. That would have done in the 70s, you're not gonna do that today. So that's a guaranteed funding probably for it. So there could have been a number of reasons for doing it. I have a quote. It says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only way that it happens, that it occurs." And that was Margaret Mead. You know Margaret Mead. I don't know. You guys don't know Margaret Mead. You two don't. No, I'm kidding. But age-wise, she was around a lot years and years ago. But she's right. She was fabulous. That's how the world gets changed, is by thoughtful, committed people. That's the human trafficking that was domestic violence against women in the 70s. So Polaris, the Polaris Project, and I think I have that on your handout, was started by 2 Brown University students, male and female. They found that 6 South Korean women had been trafficked into prostitution in Providence, Rhode Island. And of course, those who know Brown, it's a very upper-crusted kind of college, right? Bunch of privileged people, etc. These 2 were horrified. How could that possibly happen under our noses? So they got together and decided they'd start a program. So they called it the Polaris North Star Project. Today, which is kind of interesting, today, after all of those years, it's now become one of the most powerful organizations for anti-trafficking in the world, frankly. It is in this country, and I think they are in the world. And you have, some of their information. They're a not-for-profit, they're non-governmental, and they work to combat and prevent human trafficking. They have a hotline that you can call if you know of somebody, or you hear something that happens, you call them. They outreach to states and to the federal government, obviously, for assistance in helping to organize. I would not be surprised if part of what's happening here today has a Polaris footprint, and maybe 2 or 3 handprints out there for people who have connected, people who've gotten information from them. So they're an amazing group, so if you can, plug into them. They have a resource center, and you can get them, I think Wikipedia has just all kinds of stuff on them, Google has all kinds of stuff. So if you're looking for information on a national level, or even some on a state level, in fact, your piece that you have, this is so funny, you have to go to Polaris to be able to get this, but we have this in Michigan, which tells you what your criminal statuses are. And the only reason I gave you this is because in the legislation that we're going to talk about, these are the laws that are usually and most likely are being amended, so that you know that the 750s have to do in the Michigan law, the MCL. You'll find that when you start looking at your legislation that these are probably the pieces that they're amending. So I stuck that in there just so you would have it. So Polaris, good thing. The counterpart to Polaris, and I'll throw it in at this point, I was going to do it a different point, but I'll put it here. Michigan has the task force. It's the Michigan Human Trafficking Task Force, the MHTC. I love these acronyms. You get lost in them. This is a 90-group organization. There's 90 organizations in it. You're going to hear Jane White tonight, or today, this afternoon. Jane's the director for this task force. That's our kind of mini Polaris. I can describe it any other way. The groups that come together meet every month. I'm part of that. And we exchange information, keep people, keep ourselves updated, get the most. Federal government's involved with like Homeland Security, IRS has come in. There's just state police are there, other law enforcement, lots and lots of groups that are here along. Grand Rapids has groups. It's just huge. It's huge. And it's wonderful because of the exchange of ideas. They have a Twitter page, they have a Facebook page. You guys like that? You guys like that? Good way to pass the information and get it. So plug into the Twitter, plug into their Facebook. Fabulous stories that they can come through. news releases. Good intellectual information, and you'll hear me use that term. We had a discussion earlier, and I'm kind of getting off base a little bit, it's going to help you, I think, as we go. The idea that when you're told something about human trafficking, it isn't always because you're told that it's the god-awful truth. You know, that's here, it's here. I've been told that Michigan is the 5th largest state for human trafficking. I don't know where that came from. There isn't any way to get a handle on what state. You can do areas, Polaris has been able to do, we've been able to do areas, but simply because we have a trafficking location, Canada, for example, coming in through other states, Ohio, Indiana, somehow someone came up and said, we're 5th in the nation. There's no way to verify that. We can't even verify exactly how many we have in this country. We know it's awful, we know it's horrendous, we know it's huge. But to get those solid numbers, we can't do it yet. We're not there yet. We're gonna get there, I hope, but we're not there yet. Simply because someone makes a call to the hotline, for example, and asks a question, that could be classified as a complaint, because they call the hotline. So every 10 calls to call the hotline, 2 might be looking for victims, 3 might be for something else, but that's 10 that came out of Michigan. So that means Michigan had 10 calls. Does that make sense? So you kind of have to temper that a bit with trying your best to confirm information that you're given. And if someone makes an accusation, great, Ronald Reagan. Trust but verify. That was the smartest thing that man ever said. Trust but verify. I loved it. I thought he's right. You always want to trust, but you always want to verify. So it is a very good point. So just throw that out as we go into the legislation. The expectations from the Victims of Trafficking Violence Act for states was the federal government said, we're going to do this. It's up to the states to set their own laws. It's up to the states to organize how they want. Good thing. We'll support them. In other words, we'll have our organizations. We have, Homeland Security. We have all kinds of immigration. We have what we do under our act of 2000. We authorized in 2013 to keep our people trained. But you as the states, that's your obligation to step up and do what you're going to do. Having said that, January of this year, 29th, Glenn Anderson introduced Resolution 9 on making the month of January Human Trafficking Month. That was our first start. Great idea. When you read the resolution, he's on point with a number of things, but because it's so new, because things are there, you would probably read it and go, gee, that sounds good, but there might be something in here that's not quite. But that's okay. From the standpoint, it started the ball rolling. I know Senator Anderson, his heart is absolutely in the right spot. He saw this, heard it, same kind of thing, had this awakening and went, this is not a good thing. I want to make sure people know. So that's why I put the resolution in. At that time, he also had started a committee of bipartisan groups that legislators came together and started looking at it. And they started connecting with Polaris. They started with the Hope Project. They reached out to survivors. They had these meetings, these committees. Came up with 5 bills. Senate Bill 499 is the bill that he has out there that is creating a Human Trafficking Reporting Act. First start. Then the others from 500 to 503 are kind of like assisting with that act. So we have an act that had a bill out there in September. In April of this year, the AG, the Attorney General, Bill Schuette, also had the idea that this is something that's coming down that we all need to kind of understand and start to work on. So he created a commission. And this commission was brought as a bipartisan. He brought in the governor's office is there, his office is there, Prosecutors Association is there, legislators are there. I'm trying to think who else on that committee, the commission. There's been statements that the Michigan task force was appointed to that commission. They were not appointed to the commission. What the task force was asked to do, Jane's been right there all along, is to come in and sit with them, work with them, advise them, help them with information. But the commission itself is made up of legislators, governor's office, and prosecutors association, and et cetera. Now, for them, and I'm getting a little ahead, but I'll throw it out. At this stage, we don't know what they're doing. We don't have any idea what they're doing. Well, I should put it like that. We know that they're looking at legislation. We know that they're looking at recommendations, because whatever legislation passes and becomes a law, the state has to implement that. So in order to implement it, they have to be able to go to community health, human services, and say, if you get traffickers, victims in, this is what you need to do. So they're setting up the recommendations, but we don't know what those recommendations are and how they're going to do it. I will make a second political statement. When I saw the list of who is on that commission, something very glaring came to me immediately. There are no minorities on this commission. It was interesting because I thought to myself, that's a little odd, and then I realized you only go by what you know. Whether a legislator, whether it's you, whether it's me, we only go by what we know. And we all know that politically, and this is a legislative piece, and so politically we're going to, say things, and please raise your hand for questions or whatever. We know that our Senate and our House and our gubernatorial are Republican controlled. That's what Michigan is today. So because of that, you'll have committees and commissions and et cetera that are heavy on one side or another. That's how it works. It's called spoils of who wins the political system. If it were the reverse and you had all Democrats, it would be the same kind of thing. Now, having said that, personally for me, it's always very difficult for me to see political entities, legislative bodies, I don't care what level it is, from your local level to your state to your federal to whatever, to be one party. I've never liked that. And maybe it's because I like Darty. I don't know what it is, but I like to have a balance. I've always liked a balance. And some will look at that to say that it becomes an obstruction. And, that you need to have everything the same so it flows. The problem with that, for me, legislatively and politically, it flows in the same direction. There's no one that says, you might want to divert that over to the stream to go here to help, or you might want to divert it over there. Regardless of what it is, I don't like all Democrats in control, I don't like all Republicans in control. I like to be able to say that we can sit down at the table, we can discuss, we have different ideas. No one in this room probably has the same idea about anything. If you all had to come together to make a decision on something, it would take you some time to do it, because you would all have different ideas. That's what it's supposed to do. Because by the time you get done, you got a fabulous product. Every one of you had to compromise, every one of you had to give up something, but you came up with a really great product because of all the different ideas. So I'll get off my soapbox. Having said all that, that has a lot to do many times with your legislation. So, Attorney General in April, he's good. Michigan Task Force, that started in 2007. They're good. So there's a path now that's been started. We've got two going. We've got a path with Senator Anderson. We've got a path going with the Attorney General. We're going to have a number of paths, actually, in Michigan that's taking place. The next path is going to be Senator Judy Emmons. Now, she was involved initially with Senator Anderson in this committee that they gave together, just like you're sitting here today. That would be as if you guys are coming together and you're going to figure out legislation about human trafficking. Out of that, she decided, apparently, because she looked at that and went, this either isn't moving in the direction I want, it's not moving fast enough, or they're not addressing what I want to address. All good reasons. So she starts a committee, and out of that, initially came out with 5 packages. She had 6. She had 6 altogether, a couple House bills and a couple Senate bills that her group worked on. And they introduced that, and that would have been between February, I think is what they did, and October. So she's on her path. Now the second path that she started, she's going down even further. Her phase 2, she had survivors that came in. She's plugged into, I don't know if she plugged into the task force, she must have plugged into the task force. And again, Polaris, and again, the whole project, and it's the same you know, people who are the experts in there that she had plugged into. Out of that, she has a 19 bill package. So if you look at it in Michigan, you start out with your resolution, you start out with, you know, the 4 bills or 5 bills that the senator had, Senator Anderson. You have the Attorney General, who's on the commission working. We don't know what they're doing, but we know they're doing, and we know they've worked really hard for whatever they're doing. You had Senator Inman's first section where she had 6 bills. You have her in her second phase where she has 19 bills that she's got in, all on human trafficking, all trying to do the same thing, address human trafficking. One of the pieces that I gave you is the 3 pieces to look at for the safe harbor, for a clean slate, and for traffickers accountability. And Leslie's speech keeps going through my head as I'm, you know, looking at this going, these are exactly what she talked about. They are in Emmons' package. Now, these are things that the task force has looked at. And what's difficult, now let me back up before I go into the difficult part. In her package, she has the safe harbor, she has victims to sue their captors, and she has convictions that will be cleared. So when in fact a prostitute goes in, she no longer is the criminal, she will become the victim, or he. You do know this is a male-female thing, although it's more female, but sadly enough, there are males, and there are male victims to being assaulted and being trafficked. So having said that, these convictions will be set aside so that they will not be tainted for the rest of their lives. They'll be able to get education, they'll be able to get jobs, they'll be able to work the system so that there is support for them. They'll no longer be considered the criminal to go. So how those are written, someone asked me earlier, how do you know if that's the right thing to do? That's the tricky part in the legislation. We don't know if it's the right thing to do. We know that if you have all of these bills out, they're all addressing the same issue, it's really hard to decide which one is the right one to do, because every one of them will have a certain idea, a certain thing that they'll need to do with it. It's going to be whatever the legislators decide, and frankly, I'm going to tell you, it's going to be what you decide if you plug into them. Because you're the ones, as the advocates, that will call them up and say, so how's it going, and what's happening, and exactly what does that bill do? And if you realize there's something really wrong with that, or you're not real happy with it, you write them, you call them, you tell them, wait a minute, this I don't think is a good idea that you do it. It does make an impact when there's enough of you that do it. So that and advocating is an important piece. We'll get to that. Money. Always got to get the money part. The appropriation to be able to put these bills in effect. At this stage, I have not been able to find any appropriated dollars. I've looked at Senate appropriations for community health and for human services. They have line items that they will list out the service that they want, they'll put a dollar amount on it. And whether it comes out of general funds or wherever it's at, they'll have human trafficking listed, 000. One of the bills had human trafficking, $100, which is what they call, I can remember the term for it, not too long. It actually opens a slot. It keeps a slot open. You put $100 in there, that slot is open, so that when it goes into the conference or back to the committee, they go, oh, all right, you have a slot here. We're going to add $1 million to it. We're going to add $50,000 to it. You've got the slot open. That was removed in one of the conference reports. The governor's recommendations. He comes out with, and his staff, they create recommendations for all the budgets. You guys talk about time-consuming things. This is time-consuming. So in his recommendations, he's not even listing human trafficking on either of those committees. So I'm not real happy with that. Now, one of the legislators was here earlier today, I guess, who was on appropriations. I wish I would have been able to be here at the same time he was. And one of the gentlemen that was here earlier noticed him, so she's going to call him. I said, good, you call him, I'm going to call him. We're going to find out, is there dollars that are going to be spent for this? you know, having said that, that's the difficult part when it comes to the chairs of appropriations. If you're a chair of an appropriation, you do nothing else. You are assigned no other committee. There's no way you could do it because it is so intense and takes so much time. If you're appointed to the committee, you'll probably have one, maybe at a max, 2 other committees. But chances are you'll have one other committee because appropriations is very powerful and it's very time consuming, very difficult because they're literally deciding how your dollars are going to be spent. They are the ones that do. So it's really crucial that they're good at what they do and the fact that they're willing to listen to what it is that people, again, that becomes very political. How you're going to spend your money, what you're going to do with it. So having said that, for human trafficking, it appears at this time that there aren't appropriated dollars, which if in fact these bills pass, and again, the Attorney General, who obviously is going to have more power than you have put together to determine if there's money he needs, he'll probably find it. But we don't know until he comes out with what he's doing. So there isn't any way to tell. So the appropriation thing is, I think, a stickler. It's going to put a huge amount of pressure into the private sector because they can create the laws, they create the safe havens, they can tell law enforcement that this is what they want you to do, and then it's going to be the private sector that's going to have to fund it. They can send them through human services, they can send them through community health, but the private sector is going to be the ones. So it's not, it doesn't look like it's going to be a fair situation here, but that, again, that's very gray. We don't know what's going to happen exactly. So we have to wait and see how that's going to shake out. So from the appropriations, we then, we're doing pretty good here, go back to the Attorney General because we don't know exactly what he's going to do. So what we're going to see, And I'm looking here, the task force, talked about that. That's kind of like I say, our mini Polaris. Steps for you for advocating. That's what you're looking to do or to get involved with what's happening. Obviously, newspaper articles that's coming out more and more. What is coming out more and more, I'm finding is on public radio. You're finding channels with, you know, the Dish and all that good stuff. I had 2 channels when I was a kid. I remember some of them today. So there's stuff that's coming out all the time. It's coming from overseas. Great Britain's been doing stuff. I've seen stuff that's come out of Sweden. I've seen things that have been on television comes out about the United States. So you're seeing it. When you hear it, or when you are surfing, click and you got it, stop and listen. Stop and look at it. Radio stations, all of that, all those good things, that you use, that you garner your information. Task force. So when you've gotten that, your next step, as you're looking at your information, these out, citizen guides. You don't have to get a citizen guide. Does anybody here know what a citizen's guide is? A citizen guide is literally what it says. You're a citizen and it's going to guide you. This you will find, the stickers that are on here, for example, this one has Rebecca. Senator Warren is involved on the commission. And I don't know if I have a Judy Emmons, I have, but I don't know, I think the ones that are blank probably came from Glenn Anderson, Senator Anderson's office. Did you get a blank one? Oh, you got it. Nope, that's good. Now, the reason for these, you can get these from your legislator. Now, because of term limits, these are updated every 2 years. Used to be we'd have to update these for years and years. Now with term limits, updated every 2 years. The middle or end of March is the time to call your legislator once an election's over. 2014, March. Call them, ask for an updated citizen guide. They may try to tell you, oh, you know it's on the computer. And you're going to say, thank you very much, but I want a hard copy. And request that they send you a hard copy. And it's nice if you like the computer, but however, if you have this in your hand, this will be a little easier to be able to access. You're going to put notes in it, I'm assuming, if you're going to be using it. You're gonna highlight, you're going to underline, you're gonna do all kinds of stuff by your legislator. You can find who your legislator is by checking the front. And of course, gives you the federal people first, gives you your Supreme Court, speaks about the Michigan legislature. It's going to give you additional information in your counties as to where you are for the Senate seat, who your senator is, who your representative is, and you look through that. You have your districts alphabetical, tells you who your leaders are, your majority, for Republican, who your leaders are, who the Democratic leaders are. Tells you you have 63 Republicans, 47 Democrats. That's the break. Your pictures that'll show your legislator how to get into his office or her office, whichever works. This is really a book to keep. In all the years I was there, if I'd have kept them, I would have had, I never was frankly without one of these, even though I was there and knew who they were and had things pretty well memorized after a while. Never functioned without it for a lot of reasons. It's just an incredibly helpful piece to have. And once you use it, you'll be bugging them every 2 years for your new one because you'll like it so well. And you can get it through your Senate, through your rep, whichever way that you decide to go. Page 60 tells you how a bill becomes law. That's the piece that is another really interesting piece. And I don't know if any of you have ever walked through how a bill becomes law. You can start it. We'll start with Senate Bill 499. We'll say that Senator Anderson has done everything that he needed to do. He talked to all the groups. He's done everything that he's wanted to do, and he wants to write a bill. So he sends a staff person, and they've done their research, they've done everything. He puts a request into LSB, which is the Legislative Service Bureau. The Service Bureau was the gurus as far as I was concerned. They're the attorneys who, there is no law they don't know, or they haven't looked at, or haven't adjusted, or haven't had to work with. They're a fabulous group of individuals, just fabulous. So we go to LSB, we say, okay, this is what we want to do. Now, this is where I got stuck many years ago because, I really got stuck on this. It took me a while to get through my head. When your legislators decide that they want to do a law, they want to pass a bill, they create it. It goes through the process, goes to the governor, it's going to get signed, we'll say. It becomes a law. There is nothing any place along that line that requires that it be constitutional. No place along that line. We've been wrapping around about that for a long time. So it becomes law. When it becomes, and if it becomes challenged, it's the court that determines the constitutionality of it. That was always a really interesting piece for me because I always thought they had to know. And I had to learn that no, your legislators are humans just like you are. Constitution is something the experts know. So when that law goes in, until somebody challenges it, it's the law. Now, from one point of view, who is it that gets to go into court? Who do we know can afford to go into court? Business. Groups that have it. Can the farmer, can the school teacher, can me, can you go into court and challenge? There are ways to do it, but so the idea of having to challenge it is pretty overwhelming and somewhat of a chilling effect. So you want to make sure, and that's what you do, is that when in fact those laws are done, they're good laws. And that again comes with the intellectual knowledge, particularly human trafficking, of how things play out. Is this really how that happens? Are we going to be doing the right thing? Are we going to be harming a group of people that we really don't realize the unintended consequences of it without thinking it through? How is this going to play out? So it is really important that when in fact you get engaged politically, that the people that you're engaged with are good hard workers. And 9 out of 10, absolutely, no question. But your input helps kind of guide that line as to asking questions and making sure that things are done. So, off that soapbox, the bill 499. We've now gone to LSB. We've been given a blue back, and it's called a blue back because that identifies it as a new bill. They take that blue back, meaning that it's complete, and they get signatures, they want co-sponsors. So I'm gonna sponsor this, and I'm gonna go over here and say, Chloe, you like my bill, you're gonna co-sponsor, because you think I'm right, and you know it, right? So you can put your name on it. So Chloe now is in with me, I'm the sponsor, but Chloe and I, she's gonna support it. So her office then is going to support this blue bag. And then I'm gonna come over here, Jeff, you wanna be on my bill? So Jeff's gonna be on my bill. So sometimes you'll see bills that have no sponsors, sometimes you'll see them with 30 sponsors to it. That's how they do it. They take the blue bag and go to each individual legislator and pick and choose who they want to sign it to help sponsor. So they've got it all signed, they've got it all done, they turn it in. Now it gets turned into the clerk for the Senate or the House. So we'll say we're gonna start at the Senate. So it gets turned into the Senate. They enroll it, and it gets bill number. Now we got $4.99, so we know that that's our bill. It's gonna go into committee now, so they're going to sign it, probably to Human Services, because we know it's a trafficking issue, so it's in Human Services. Now, depending on who's that chair, is that gonna get a hearing? This is why everybody needs to be nice in the sandbox. Because that chair determines, what's going to happen as to whether that bill is gonna be heard for a hearing. So we're gonna say he's really nice, or she, and it's okay. So it's gonna have a hearing, goes to the hearing. Special interest groups come in. They tell you exactly what they think of it. I don't like it, I think it's a mistake, you need to change this. No, I think it's super, it's absolutely fabulous, leave it the way it is. Whoever has the most pressure here may get amended, may not. So we'll say, whatever it was, they all agreed, committee members now all think it's okay, they pass it out. Now, after that whole process, that it gets passed out, gets to the floor, gets voted on, it's okay, they all have agreed. Now it's going to go over to the House and start the whole thing all over again, from the beginning. It's going to be assigned to a committee. It's going to have to see if it gets a hearing in the Senate. If the Senate doesn't like who the House is, it won't get a hearing. So now it's going to get a hearing. And it'll do the exact same thing through the whole process, and it's going to the Senate. So now the House and the Senate have agreed upon it. So both have said, this is really a good bill. Did their voting, everything. Now it goes to the governor. The governor says, oh, you guys gotta be kidding me. I don't think this is gonna work. I'm not sure. And so I think I'm either gonna let it die, or somebody's gonna have to convince me that this is okay. Governor finds it's okay, puts the John Hancock on it, becomes a law within 90 days, unless it has immediate effect, which that means the day he signs it, it's law. Immediate effect was something that was used very sparingly way back when, because that meant that, again, you signed it, it became law. Usually there are 90 days you need to get ready for it, you know it's coming out there, so the state can prepare for it, individuals can prepare for it, everybody knows in 90 days you're gonna have it. The only time they would do immediate effect on rare occasions was if it was an emergency that something needed to be done. Today, the IE is used like popcorn. They're constantly doing the IE thing, immediate effect. So it's just a change in how it operates and how they're doing it. So now you have a law that created a Human Trafficking Reporting Act. And now everybody goes to work and does what that report's supposed to do, assuming that Senator Anderson tie-barred a few of his bills that would support the infrastructure, which he did. A number of his bills are tie-barred. A tie-bar means that if 499 passes, it will take along with him the other 2 or 3 bills that he's tie-barred to. So they all pass together. They didn't pass as one. If those 19 bills in Senator Emmons, if they're not tie-barred, and I don't think, although there may be 2 that are, I don't know if the wiretappings are tie-barred, but we'll have to see. If she tie-bars 1 or 2 of them, they will go together as a group. Otherwise, they have to be voted on separately, they have to be heard separately, everything has to be done separately. They don't go together. So it's a very, very long process. If you have 19 bills that you have no connection, even though they'll hear 19 bills, they'll have to be voted on individually in order to do it, if she doesn't tie-bar them. So yeah, it's an amazing process. You got to the It appears to be a very complex process, but frankly, guys, I wouldn't want it any other way. I don't think I'd want, now, we had a gentleman who was from another country here, and he was saying that we seem to be behind. Yeah, we are. We are behind in human trafficking. And those of us who were around at the time, when domestic violence was just coming out of the shell, and the only reason it came out of the shell, thank God, a woman burned her husband to death. I know that sounds awful. But when Francine Hughes set her husband on fire down in Dansville, the whole world exploded for domestic violence. It's a great book if you haven't read it. It's called The Burning Bandit. Or I think Farrah Fawcett played Francine Hughes in the movie. Did she do that? It's a good book. It's really a good book. That opened the whole issue of domestic violence. You didn't have domestic violence back then. No one heard of it. All they did was, call the cops, the wife's getting beat. Darn, I'm really sorry, he's gonna have to leave for a couple hours, and he comes back and beats her again. No laws, no nothing, they would take it. She sacrificed without even obviously thinking. It did change the whole environment of domestic violence. And it became very clear that there are women who couldn't get out of relationships, when we would look at them before and say, why don't you just leave? You're being mean to me, why don't I just leave? I should be able to go. The guy's beating the crap out of me. Because they don't, because of the psychological effect, because of the economics, because of so many things we were not aware of. Human trafficking is the same thing. We are not aware of what they go through, what happens. So my wish is, if we have to go through the painful stages we did with domestic violence, and we survived and we came out much, much better for it, I'm willing to spend the next 30 years, if we have to go through the same process to address human trafficking, not just in Michigan, not nationally, but throughout the world. I don't like seeing children drown for a shrimp. I don't like seeing people burn up in a building because I want a pair of tennis shoes. I don't, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with how we do it. And if it means that we have to protect the victims, then we'll protect the victims. And so that's what we're looking to do. So that's a little history that goes back with hopefully how we're going to play this out. So any questions? I think I talked a little fast and I threw things at you that probably were more than what could be, oh, you don't think she got it? No, that's okay, keep going. No, is there any questions at all? Please.
Has Michigan kind of had looked at any other states kind of like a model for setting up some of these laws, or is there any I guess, mentality of that?
You're seeing a very slow movement in some. New York, fabulous. It's really just kicking the can literally in the butt and moving down the road. Recently, Super Bowl. Where was that held? Okay, guys, last Super Bowl. Is that what, okay. At that Super Bowl, because I never read the article, I couldn't remember what
Yeah, I
it
remember
was.
something about like the Constitution.
Don't bring human trafficking to us in the state.
Yeah.
So what they did, obviously, was set up and made sure that either they were arrested or they simply didn't come to the Super Bowl, which would be a fabulous place for the sex trafficking. Fabulous place. I mean, the money they could make off that would be huge. But they said, nope, not here, not going to do it. It was human trafficking that they used. So, yeah, there's movements that are taking place, and people are starting to, to look at it and say, we're going to do something, it's not going to happen.
Are a lot of laws focused right now more on, I guess, within the state, but is there some push for moving towards like not accepting, I guess, like or placing barriers on products that have slave trade involved
Yeah,
in them?
go to that, you will see that occasionally.
Okay.
There are small pieces, you'll have to look for them, you have to find them. Yes,
Are they usually
you will
barriers?
find it. You're seeing it more today, for example, I can tell the story of the shrimp. We were talking about shrimp. I have a friend who literally will not put a shrimp in her mouth. She did not know and has read and has found from her perspective that we're the largest consumers of shrimp in this country, the United States. The shrimp comes from Thailand, from third world countries, where they send children, what we consider babies, very young, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, diving for the shrimp. They work them 10, 12, 14 hours a day. They drown. Can't do that's okay, body floats away, we just bring another kid in to do it. Human doesn't mean anything, as long as the shrimp. That's the bottom line, that's the economics of it. And my question to her when she was telling me this was, how do you know where the shrimp came from? Because she said, I'm never gonna buy a salad again, I can't do it. And she kind of looked at me and she said, well, it came from Thailand. Well, do you know that? The intellectual knowledge, do you know that's where that company gets that shrimp? Probably, but do you know for sure? So she's going back and finding out. Now I'm going into my stores and saying, can you tell, and I'm finding they don't know. So I'm going to call a corporation. Now, would you normally do that? Would you spend the time doing that? That's what you guys have to decide. You're going to spend the time to find out where it's coming from. I'll spend the time. I will call until I find out where is the shrimp coming from for this company that I go to. Because I want to know. Because if that's really where it's coming from, then I'm going to call and say, I got news for you guys. I'm not buying that shrimp, and this is why. But we love shrimp. Where else are we going to get it? So are you willing to give it up for that if you love the shrimp and you like it? So those are the choices. And it goes back to the same thing. Bangladesh, with the, the clothes that were being made in the factory that burned down, and how many hundreds of people died because of our tennis shoes, or because of our clothes, our t-shirts. It's almost the point, that's why I kind of laugh at something, well, I'm not only going to be naked, but I'm going to starve to death. I mean, how are we going to, how are we going to work this out? How is that going to, how do you stop them from using babies because it's cheap labor, to make them pay a wage, and to say you're going to work, okay, you're going to work 10 hours a day. Bad enough. Here we're so used to the 8 hours and a lunch break, and they don't get that. It's a solid thing. Their lives are just pure hell. There's just no other way to put it. For my enjoyment. So how do you balance that? How do we as consumers look at that and decide what we're going to do? That actually falls kind of get off the legislative part, but in a sense it does connect to it, because the laws that we're going to do for the trafficking and the sex trade, of course, is always the good sexy thing. Everybody loves to do that. The forced labor in Michigan, whole different question because of the economics. Our migrant workers that come in here, we got a whole bushels and bushels and bushels of apples that are being ready to pick. Are those going to be picked by migrants that are being paid with a wage, that are going to have a housing, that their kids are going to be able to go to school? I mean, or are they trafficked to come in and work 15, 16 hours a day in the apple orchards? Now, we know we have unregistered migrant farms in Michigan, interesting enough. We don't know exactly how many, but we know they're unregistered. And we know that there's a number that we have registered migrant working farms. If they're registered, you can be pretty sure, assuming the state has the money and has the willpower, to go in and check out to see how's the living conditions, what are the children doing? Do you have 4 and 5-year-olds out in the field that are working 8 hours a day? Do you have a 10-year-old out there? What is it supposed to be, 16? 12. Oh, that's right, they lowered it. They lowered it to 12. Again, economically. So those are the questions we need to look at. And what are you going to trade off? I don't know. Everybody's got to answer that themselves. But somewhere, this whole thing, we have to be able to come with the legislation and be able to have good laws that are going to protect people.
It seems like we do have some good laws already. Like, I'm not saying that we don't need any more, but it seems like enforcing them is a big problem.
What would be a good law that you would give me an example?
Well, I mean, like, the trafficking is illegal already. Like, it's not like these are making trafficking illegal, and we have, like, that's already on the books, right? But we aren't funding people to do that.
The term human trafficking is the term that needs to be. We have prostitution on the books.
We don't have human trafficking on the books in Michigan.
That's why they're creating what they're doing. It's because that whole mindset is coming. Prostitution will be considered human trafficking if they fall within the certain realm of what they do, or how it's described. So it's kind of like updating the law to say, a prostitute now will not be looked at as a criminal. She or he will be looked at as a victim. That's a whole huge different piece than the books, you know, the law that we have on the books. But you're right, anytime you get that, this is why I'm concerned about the appropriation piece, is because if you get the law, what good does it do if we're not going to enforce it? And who's going to enforce it? Now that's the other, when you talk turf problems, law enforcement issue, state police. Everything from the state goes to state police, hotline, everything goes to state police. What happens with your local county sheriff's department? What happens to your local township and city departments when it comes to funding, or it comes to training, or it comes to what you're supposed to do? So the question is, does it go here as a whole umbrella so that your state troopers are taking everything? Do you filter it down into your counties? Do you filter it down into the locals? Those are all the questions that come up with this legislation. Right now, my understanding is MSP is going to be. Is that right? Is it wrong? That's the way it is. It's not a right or a wrong. That's the way it is. There are groups that will argue both sides. So yeah, and then the enforcement part, will the locals enforce it if it's the state police that's going to do it? I mean, I don't know. You don't know. But those are the questions that you need to keep asking, and keep calling and asking, and finding out, you know, what you're doing in the advocacy part. But I will guarantee you, if you take it on, it's going to be a job. And it's going to be a job that you'll go, what was I thinking? Sounded good at the time. But do hang on to your citizen guides. What time do we have? Come on, I'm looking. We are at 3:30. Okay. You guys are great. Any other questions? Anything that I missed or you wanted to go over, or I bored you to death with, or? Okay. All right. Yes.
Could you repeat that quote that you said, like the way Barbie getting?
Oh, the Barbie
I
meeting?
didn't catch it.
No. Oh.
Are you okay?
I am. Now, 10 years ago, I'd have flipped over that sucker and just been gone. No, got my foot on it. My kids would laugh and say, "Oh, Lord, you're getting there." Okay. Let's see. That was the Margaret Mead one, which has always been one of my favorites because it is small groups that absolutely make the difference. You guys sitting in this room. It says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world." Indeed, comma, it is the only thing that ever has. And it is so true. Not moved by mountains of corporations or big business. It's done like people here sitting in the room. Guys, thank you so much.